Democratic oligarchy is attractive to wealthy elites because it affirms the simplest, oldest, and most influential exercise in moral psychology, the rhetorical justification of selfishness. Far more interesting, then, is to consider why ordinary Americans, whose lives are made more difficult by democratic oligarchy, are attracted to it. To that end, I begin this chapter by putting democratic oligarchy in conversation with other voices, exploring why people support ideas and policies at odds with their interests. An imperfect synthesis. On the surface, democratic oligarchy's popular resonance contradicts what Gershberg and Illing call a folk theory of democracy, defined by governing institutions oriented toward maximizing equality, universalizing inclusion, and the perfect synthesis between the interests of ordinary citizens and their elected leaders. According to the folk theory of democracy, exclusion, inequality, and imperfect synthesis are incongruous deviations from democracy's telos, usually caused by some confluence of mass ignorance and ideological manipulation. Scholars and public intellectuals often approach the political right's sustained capacity to attract the support of middle and working class Americans from this perspective, such as in-depth studies of Kansas voters, evangelical Christians, the Tea Party, and lately, Donald J. Trump. In his 2024 book, What's the Matter with Kansas?, Thomas Frank details how politicians in Kansas moved voters from reliable partisans of the New Deal to the conservative camp by featuring conservative values on the campaign trail, and then, once in office, smashing the welfare state, reducing the taxes of corporations and the wealthy, and leaving a working-class movement that has done incalculable historic harm to working-class people. Frank takes as axiomatic that the duped Kansas voter and the man in the breadline weeping for the man lounging on his yacht reflect an ideological triumph. Frank drew the ideological conquest far beyond Kansas, pointing out that the mystery of America is the historical shift urging conservatives to erupt in revolt and call for more of the deregulation, privatization, and laissez-faire policies that caused their ruination in the first place. In his more recent book, Pity the Billionaire, Frank also details conservatism's dalliance with error and decries the millions of Americans increasingly separated from social reality. More than deception alone, Frank writes, the right has met its goals by offering an idealism so powerful it clouds its partisans' perceptions of reality. Frank deploys a set of brainwashing metaphors to illustrate his point, describing Glenn Beck's rhetoric as like something from a brainwashing session as Lubyanka, the lunacy of the rejuvenated right, the funhouse mirror of contemporary conservatism, and the bald hypocrisy of rhetorics like Paul Ryan, which should be obvious to anyone with an internet connection.